Mata Wateawank. These are not the words of others. It is our words that speak of our truths. Yo kayut misquach nahai ganset. Wuchi kautantuit. This is the land around us of the Narragansett. Yogam wuchak wuchi meninwaksa. Wuchi wame akwampe. They came to this place from across the great salt waters. The land belongs to no man, but it is put there by the great Creator for all people to use and to respect and to take care of. Wuchi kautantuit. Thanks were given to the great Creator by the people. Yakwa, what is happening? Tiyakwa, what is going on? We have walked these places. We have reaped the benefits of the Earth Mother in these places. Why are we not allowed there anymore? Niut shikashem. Towut kapabji wa mu mishi oganki. We come to the time of the great swamp. We come to the time of great change. Mishkwi, mishkwi, mishkwi yo kayut. There is death here and there. Everywhere there is death. Neninwin mishwag. Ki jiso kiti swa suk papu swag. Na kwaganak ma wi tuomak. Yote, yote. Mishkwi, mishkwi. They have killed the old ones. They have killed the women. They have killed the children in this place. They were killed and they were burned. Ayiwaonk, kutawank, kutawank no shishtiag, ut meyut. These were the words that we heard, where the great Captain Pierce was to kill all of our people. However, a plan was put in motion.
During the King Philip's War, the number of settlers were being attacked by the Indians. Some of the Massachusetts communities had received word that there were a band of Indians operating in this area. A number of settlers from Rehoboth and Scituate, Massachusetts, grouped together and came here under Captain Michael Pierce.
According to history, there was a Captain Pierce set out with a troop of over 60 people with, I believe, over 20 friendly Indians to ambush the Indians that have been creating an uprising in this general area. As he approached the area, was formerly called Alborough Gore, adjacent to Central Falls on the Blackstone River, the Indians in turn ambushed him.
A couple of the people were to pretend that they were wounded and they were hurt and to flee from the oncoming soldiers. They took the bait and followed. And when they followed, the soldiers followed and went into a trap.
Pierce and his troops, along with some Indian auxiliaries, started marching up the east side of the Seekonk or the Blackstone River. And their goal was to go after some Indians that had been causing some trouble in the area. records indicate that at some point during this, either before or during the battle, a runner was sent to Providence here to gather some troops and have them come up. A good reason for this would be to catch the Indians in a hammer and anvil, have Pierce and his troops moving up the east side of the river, catch the Indians on the west side of the river, and have the troops from Providence come up and smash them in between the two armies. Whatever happened, that runner came here and didn't want to disturb the residents of Providence during the church meetings. Okay, so the troops from Providence never got up there in time. Pierce, as he's marching up the east side of the river, sees what appear to be some wounded Indians at about where High Street is in Cumberland right now. And they limp across the river into what is now Central Falls. He and his men come running across, running up. Here's their opportunity to actually get some of those Indians. They come across the ford, and as they come across, apparently are attacked by a group of Indians and pushed into a corner. There's deep water in back of it. It's in a big bend in the river. They're pushed in there so they have no escape. As they get pushed into that corner, okay, another group of Indians come up basically from the south and catch them in basically a two-pronged attack, keeping them punched into the corner. Some of the records of the fight say that at this point, the soldiers are fighting back-to-back, shooting in both directions. So the Indians are coming at them from two directions. Once that's accomplished, a third group of Indians comes down. It's a classic military tactic going back to Roman times of catching your enemy with two pincers and then driving through the center. The Zulus used it during the Zulu War. They called it the bull's attack. The two horns of the bull would come in from each side, and then the head of the bull would strike the enemy in the meat. And Pierce and his men were absolutely devastated. Pierce, being the officer and probably in a prominent position, was probably one of the first people to fall. Since they were a militia, they weren't a highly trained military unit. Once the officer goes, they're just a bunch of farmers with guns at that point. Not really well disciplined. They're fighting for their lives. It would have been a mess. As far as it being a massacre, well, sort of like Custer's Last Stand, you have a small force of the military going after a much larger Native American force, and it wouldn't have taken very long for it to be a defeat for the colonial forces there. Apparently, there were 9 men that were seeing that it was a hopeless cause and were able to escape back across the ford onto the Cumberland side of the river. And High Street is an old Indian trail going straight up that way towards where the monastery is, and either were captured along the way or ran into another group of Indians or basically were pursued up in that direction. They were captured, apparently tortured, and executed at that spot.
How the men got from the Pierce fight battle site to the monastery in Cumberland, which is about 5 miles, would have been that they were probably chased. I mean, I'm sure it was, mayhem and confusion and who knew, what. There probably wasn't a whole lot of time to think in the heat of the battle, and they were probably just chased off in one direction. And they just kept going that way. Maybe they didn't have a chance to circle around and head back south again, and they just went in whatever direction they could get off onto. But they stayed together as a group somehow, and who knows why, but I guess they figured there was strength in numbers. And what I imagine is that the battle, at the end of the battle, they were left. They got off in the middle of March, which can be damp and cold, and it could have been snowy, who knows. But they took off into Cumberland, and that's where they were eventually caught up with.
Well, it's a little bit of a walk from the monastery proper to get to where we are right now. You take a lot of the trails, jogging trails back here. Hundreds and hundreds of residents of the town use these trails all the time. More and more folks becoming aware of the local history come to this site because Nine Men's Misery is one of the more significant historical sites in the town of Cumberland. So it's become a popular site. It's often a beautiful setting because you got all these hills here and you're surrounded by a lot of water. So a lot of folks have started coming out here. Unfortunately, the story connected with it's not a very pretty one, so a lot of times when people hear the story for the first time, it gives them a bit of a chill.
Nine Men's Misery, you've got 9 men that were survivors of the battle. They were either running away from the battle, crossing at High Street, and then probably following the Indian Trail north, or they were being pursued. Some point along the way, they were brought up to Swamp Camp, or Camp Swamp, an Indian base where the monastery is right now. And the story goes that they were tortured and then finally executed there. Now, there's a couple of possibilities about this torture. For the Iroquois, for example, in upstate New York, if you captured an enemy after a battle or during a battle, that enemy has lost their honor. They didn't die in battle, and they are a dishonored person. To help them regain their honor, you would put them through physical hardship by various means which we would now consider torture, and allowing them through this suffering to regain their honor before they were to die. So the torturing part of it might be just the English way of looking at what happened to the bodies before they were killed. It might have been, from the Indian point of view, a way of helping these warriors regain their own personal honor before they died.
In some tellings of the story, the discovery of the bodies was a rather gruesome sight, as they were found to have been dismembered. Some people say that no, that wasn't the truth, that they were actually intact, found that way, in what was at the time considered the first mass grave for white men in this country. But other people that I've talked to since said, yes, the bodies were in a state. Some people attribute that to the fact that animals might have gotten to the bones. Other people say that they were dismembered, possibly live, as a fitting punishment for men who sought out to eliminate the last of the stragglers, men, women, children. So there's a lot of discrepancies here. The one thing that's true is that I found, growing up as a kid, this was not a story that folks were telling us in school. It's a rather painful story. It's a rather horrible story. And perhaps the gruesome elements of it are the thing that attract a lot of people to the story. But there's a spiritual presence to this place. Almost everybody that's come here has talked about it. This is a very special spot. This actual piece of land was where the tribe settled, or where the members of this tribe settled, the Native Americans who settled here. And it's also the home to two different religious sects. Monastery was here through the late 1800s. So you've got a place that was the residence of a Native American group and also two different religious orders. And a lot of folks who come out here who have a hobby of trekking historical sites often walk around here and say they pick up a real special vibe when they stand on the spot.
When I arrived, there was this very, very nice old French monk called Father Benedict Barret, who was the novice master and who had come to Valley Falls around 1911 after having been expelled from France with his community. And he was a mason by trade, and it would seem that some 5 years before, he had decided and had permission to build a cairn of stone over the reputed site of the burial of the 9 men who had been brought there by the Indians and executed. Knowing Father Benedict, he didn't like that heap of stones, and he just volunteered to build something more dignified. Now, the fact that the state erected a pillar of cement and placed a bronze plaque might indicate that the state was interested in setting 9 Men's Misery up as a national monument.
I don't know where all this story is going to end up. I don't know what the final truth of it all will be. I think there's so many versions of it out there that it might be difficult to ascertain what actually happened. The fact of the matter was that there was a raid, there was an attempt to overtake these Native American stragglers, and the fellows who were tracked down, or the sole remaining members of that band of Pierce's regiment that crossed the river, did end up in a grave on this side of the water, in a spot very close to this location, close to this burn right here.
I think the site represents an important time in American history, in the history of New England. It highlights the turmoil that was going on in the colonies at the time. I don't think it was a great thing for the colonists to have won a battle. I don't think it's a great thing that the Native Americans may have won a battle. But the fact is it did happen, and it's a piece of American history that the story needs to be told.
Well, I think that Nine Men's Misery really stands for the beginning of civilization for this particular area. It's the beginning of Cumberland, which is where it occurred. It's a moment in history for the residents here in Cumberland.
Well, this site is a significant part of our history, and if you, those who do not remember our history are condemned to repeat it. I think it depicts some of the early struggle that took place between the settlers and the Indians. The Indians felt an encroachment on their land. The settlers were, many of them were trying to set up their own homesteads. It was an unfortunate, circumstance that took place here, but it's just a part of our history and should be honored and remembered.
The episode of the Nine Men's Massacre, as I said, is just the tail end of a long series of acts of, well, call them by their right name, of oppression of the Indians on the part of the American colonists. I think it deserves to be brought to the attention of the people of Rhode Island and even further afield as being an important spot, but people shouldn't stop there at the scene of a massacre, but try to understand a little bit more why the Indians reacted against the encroachments of the colonists. They were being dispossessed by the colonists very unfairly, and we have a myopic, short-sighted, narrow-minded outlook on these very, I would say, heroic tribes of Indians who had their own culture going back hundreds of years and their own ethics, ethical codes, and it's a great pity they should be given a little bit broader insight into who these Indians were who massacred these settlers. They were not terrorists by nature. They were just, as it were, trying to assert their native rights, which had been violated by colonists.
Nina Misinawak Naushishwag. Na Mishi Misinawak Nametiaug. Kanushushtiag Wampi Wamposh Wamposkitampawak Ut O A de Teawak. Kasukunuktuank Paushe Wane Wieshek Paushe Wane Upakwanto Ut Jipapitsquot. They were left on the rock, some of them without their hair, and some of them without their heads. This in retaliation for what had happened at the Great Swamp the year before. Mata Wateawank. These are not the words of others. It is our words that speak of our truths.